We're here with Jamy Ian Swiss. He's a senior fellow for the James Randi Educational Foundation. How are you doing, Jamie?
Quite fine, thanks.
So we'll jump right in here. You have been described as a wizard of the sleight of hand. When did you realize you had an aptitude for it?
Oh, I don't know about an aptitude. I had an interest for it. I can tell you when that happened, I was about 7 years old. My father bought me a little mind-reading trick at a magic shop. I had all the qualifications for excellence in magic. I was a fat, four-eyed kid with a speech impediment. Oh. And so my parents were always introducing me to things to try and bring me out of myself, as they used to say in those days. And magic is a really good way for kids to do that. It involves, among other things, social skills, and it gives you something to hook on to, especially if you're shy or introverted, as I was in those days. I've since outgrown that phase. And it began with that, and I think this is a not uncommon interest, especially for American males. Typically, if an American male of any age comes up and says, "How did you get started in magic?" I always say the same way you did. And after I get that puzzled look, what? I say, well, look, sometime between the ages of 7 and 10, somebody got you a magic kit, and you read a book on Houdini, and you were interested in magic for a while, right? And I think in the last year, I think I've had one person say to me, no, that wasn't true. And, but then most people, they get up to, they get on to age 14 or 15 or 16, and they discover the opposite sex or the sex of interest, whatever it may be, and they kind of move on, and I stayed home and practiced. So I can't explain why that is, but the reason for the interest, I think, is actually commonplace, in males at least.
Oh, thank you. I had no idea myself. When did you know that you could really make magic work as a career? Or did you, maybe?
Well, that came at a very, very different time, because even though I've been doing magic since I was 7 years old, it never occurred to me to make a career out of it. It was a hobby, it was an artistic pursuit, an intellectual pursuit as well, but it never, unlike most of my friends in magic in high school and college, who in many cases put themselves through school doing birthday parties and things like that. I never did that. I did close-up magic socially. I was an only child, and I preferred, even in my adolescence, performing for adults, or even in my childhood, actually, performing for adults rather than for children. And I never did a paid gig. I never did a paid gig until I was 29 years old. And so magic actually became my third career. And but really from the time of the first paid show I ever did, I've never done anything else, in the sense that everything else I've done professionally since, as eclectic a range as it may be, you could say that it all in some way or other relates to magic.
Could you give us maybe an overview of your vision or your view of scientific skepticism specifically?
I think scientific skepticism is a movement based on several key foundational elements. Essentially, we are consumer advocates for the scientific method. I'm not a scientist, but I think that the scientific method is the best way to find out about objective truths in the world and ways to solve real problems in the world. So basically, we are promoters of a scientific method, a scientific worldview, of critical thinking and rational inquiry, of evidence-based conclusions and thinking. And these are all about ways of thinking, ways to think, to learn to think. Like as with science, the conclusions are subject to change, but the system, if you will, the process, scientific skepticism is not about what to think, it's about how to think. As well, I think we are consumer protectionists. We have a special expertise in not only science, but in non-science, if you will, and nonsense, fringe science, anti-science, paranormal claims, pseudoscience. We have an expertise in that. We have the ability to examine it, to debunk it, to offer alternative and genuine explanations for how it works, and as such, to help protect the public from consumer frauds based on pseudoscience, like homeopathy is just one of many examples. So I think debunking as an educational tool is a part of that toolkit as consumer protectionists as well.
Is there a particular science you are most passionate about, or a particular pseudoscience you enjoy debunking?
My early interest in science actually was in biology, and particularly in wildlife science. I've always been fascinated by wildlife. I came very close one time in my life to becoming involved in the zoo and zoo education world. I was a conservation wildlife activist many years ago. Before really I was a skeptical activist. And so I have a great interest in wildlife behavior. I have a great interest in predators, in nocturnal animals, in wild canines and wolves especially. These are some of my earliest interests in science. Those specific interests really don't inform my scientific skepticism very much, except in the general sense of learning what science is and what science was. More specific to my skeptical activism, as someone who's interested in science, but also as a magician. As a magician, I have a particular skill set that's relevant to the field of skepticism, and so that has a lot to do with examining psychic claims. And so I have a particular interest in the history and present work in parapsychology, and also I have a broader interest myself really in deception, in the nature of deception and how deception works. And so I have interest and expertise in all kinds of deception, not only psychic fraud, but things like con games and street scams and casino and gambling cheating, and all that whole range of subjects where it's important to be able to detect deception. I engage in deception that is for positive purpose as a magician, as an artist, sure. But I'm also interested in less benign, more malevolent uses of deception in the world.